Well, it's the end of another year, so let's talk about my top 10 favorite reads of 2022. Stay tuned, that is coming right up here on Drew's Book Reviews. Alright, let's talk about my favorite reads of 2022. We are at the end of the year here, so let's talk about it. Now, admit, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to include a whole series of books in this list. This is going to be in no particular order, so I guess really it's not really a top 10 books, but top 10 favorite reads of the year. Of course, don't forget to comment, join me over on my Discord, follow me on Bookstagram, all that's going to be linked below. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'd love to hear from you about what your favorite reads of 2022 were as well. So let's get into it. Let's talk about my top 10 favorite reads. This is going to be in no particular order. It's just going to be books that I've read this year or a series that I've read this year that absolutely fall within my favorite. Now, one thing that kind of surprised me this year is a lot of my favorite reads for this year are actually rereads, books that I have read before. Usually it's the new books that I tend to focus on, but this year definitely turned out that a lot of my favorite reads this year were actually rereads. Some of the nice things about doing a reread sometimes, though, is this could be like reading for the first time again, because it's been so long since you've read the series that you've forgotten so much. I think that probably really contributed to my feelings of it being some of my favorite rereads of the year. So let's get into it. Let's talk about some of my favorite reads. Again, this is in no particular order, just the books that I have enjoyed this year as far as some of my favorite reads go. The first up is going to be a series that I first read 20 to 25 years ago that I started my reread of this year, so definitely making one of my favorites. And it is considered an absolute all-time classic for sure. And this is a series that I am really enjoying. It's almost like reading it again for the first time, honestly, because it's just so good. And it's been so long since I've read it that I don't remember most of it. And that's going to be Isaac Asimov's Foundation. So far, I've read 3 of them in the Foundation series. So there's Prelude to the Foundation I read this year, as well as the, of course, Foundation book. And the second Foundation I've read this year as well. I'll be continuing my reread of this, of course, into the new year and continuing with the entire series. But the whole idea behind Foundation Universe is so far into the future, we're literally looking like 20,000 years in the future. Earth has been forgotten and relegated to ancient myth and legend, and nobody knows where it is. The Galactic Empire is falling apart and collapsing, and it is only through the psychohistory that Harry Seldon develops, the science that he develops to be able to accurately predict the future of large groups of people, that he discovers that the empire is collapsing and a foundation must be set up to hold on to and secure the science of mankind so that mankind can once again rise from the ruins of the old empire after about 1,000 years instead of what would otherwise be a good 30,000 years. So really good future space epic. So this is a book series that actually takes place over hundreds of years, and each part of each book is actually a relatively short, quick story within the greater universe, but we follow it along and see the developments of the Seldon history plan as it unfolds. So this is really enjoyable read. I'm really enjoying reading it again for the first time. It's essentially what it comes down to. So that is definitely making my favorite reads of the year for sure. One of my other favorite reads of this year is a book that, if I had kept to the normal schedule, would have read it in February, but I decided I'm going to wait until December because it just seems like such a fitting read for December, and I'm actually not surprised this ended up in my favorite reads of the year, but definitely Terry Pratchett's Hogfather. This was a hilarious take on Christmas and death having to take over Santa's job, basically, but in the disc world, there's no Santa Claus. It is the Hogfather. He's pulled around the world delivering gifts to little boys and girls on Hogs Watch night with the sleigh pulled by flying pigs. This is absolutely hilarious, entertaining, magical read about the power of belief to form our reality, and that childhood belief in these traditions of things like Santa Claus put into a Terry Pratchett Discworld type of setting, and it just really is a fantastic and fun read. It is definitely worth a December read. So if you haven't read Hogfather and you're interested, wait until next December if you haven't read it yet, or quickly pick it up and finish it up now. Up to you, of course. You could read it at any time, but I think it's a perfect book to be reading in December during the Christmas season, and I really enjoyed Hogfather by Terry Pratchett. Highly recommend this one. One of the other books that I read this year, I don't actually have a physical copy of the book. I will eventually, but I have it on ebook and I have it on Audible. And this one I just couldn't wait to read on release day, and so I downloaded the ebook and got it on Audible, and that is, of course, The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. Are you surprised? Are you surprised this one made my top 10 list of 2022? Seriously, if you're surprised about that, comment down below, but you shouldn't be, because I love Sanderson. I'm obsessed with the Cosmere. I love it. Every Sanderson, especially Cosmere book that's been put out, I've like, well, maybe not White Sands, but every Cosmere book that's been put out, I've really enjoyed. I love Sanderson's work. I love the Cosmere, The Lost Metal. Absolutely loved it. Definitely made one of my top favorite reads. Set on Scadrial, and we have the epic conclusion to the second era of Mistborn, essentially the second era of Mistborn, and it really sets it up so well for Era 3, which I'm really looking forward to. That's going to be a lot of fun. Absolutely love The Lost Metal. If you haven't checked out the whole Mistborn, Sanderson, Cosmere, go check it out. But definitely, this is making one of my favorite reads of the year, indisputably. And like I said, if you're surprised that this made one of my favorite reads of the year, where you been? I love Sanderson. I say it all the time on this channel. Shouldn't be a surprise, right? Speaking of Sanderson, there was one other Sanderson book that made my top favorite read of the year as well. This is one of the ones that was a reread for me. I don't quite remember how long ago the first time I read this book, but it was one of Sanderson's earlier works. And that is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. So I read along with this book with the graphic audio. This is one of the worlds of the Cosmere, of course, set on the world of Sel, where some kind of curse had happened to disrupt the magic, and people were basically turned into zombies. And Elantris is a zombie city, and the Prince Raoden finds himself cast into Elantris with the rest of the decrepit zombies of the world, and he has to try to find a way to fix this curse that has been inflicted upon these people. So Elantris is definitely one of my favorite books. I read this one in October, and it just seemed like a fitting read for the month of October in that spooky season. Check out my review of that. I do have a review on the channel for Elantris, so check that out. I'll try to remember to link that in the cards or in the description down below as well. But Elantris definitely made one of my top favorite reads of the year for sure. No doubt about it. One of the other book series that made my top reads of the year, so this again is kind of almost all a reread. I had reread the series from start to finish because I wanted to reread the series before finishing off the series, because at this point I hadn't actually read the last one, and that is Brent Week's Lightbringer Series. I do have a review for that on the channel as well, so definitely check that out. The Lightbringer Series, just search the channel or check the description or cards. I'll try to remember to put it in both locations, but Brent Week's Lightbringer Series. So the books in the Lightbringer Series include, starting off with the first book, The Black Prism. The Black Prism was followed up by The Blinding Knife. The Blinding Knife was then followed up by Book 3, The Broken Eye. The Broken Eye was followed up by The Blood Mirror, Book 4. And finally, the series wraps up with Book 5, The Burning White. So the Lightbringer is one of those really awesome series, in my opinion at least, that uses kind of the idea of turning light into physical objects as part of the magic system, which personally I find kind of interesting, because we all know at the most basic level everything is energy, and light is just a different type of energy, right? With a whole E equals MC squared physics stuff, right? So converting the energy or light spectrum into physical objects as part of the magic system was actually just really cool idea, which was also just my favorite thing about, one of my favorite things about the whole Lightbringer series. For my full thoughts on the whole series, of course, definitely be sure to go and check out my review here on the channel. But overall, I really enjoyed the whole Lightbringer concept and the religion versus the non-religious, I guess, or the pagans versus the established religion, and the politics and the magic system. Just everything about Lightbringer is just so cool, and I really, really enjoyed it. So definitely worth checking out. Check out my review of Lightbringer. It is non-spoiler, so go check that out. If you haven't read Lightbringer already, check out my thoughts on it and decide whether you want to read it for yourself. One of my other favorite reads of 2022, this was actually a heart-wrenchingly difficult, challenging read, in the sense that it's very emotionally difficult to read. But it's one that I wanted to read, and I wanted to see it from the perspective of the people that went through the residential school system here in Canada. So Indian Horse definitely made my top 10 reads of the year. Check out my review on this. It is a heart-wrenching, difficult story to read, but an important story to read. The residential school system here in Canada was just absolutely horrible. It is cultural genocide to the First Nations community. And this book, taken from the perspective of a residential school survivor here in Canada, was just a heart-wrenching, powerful read. And it's definitely one, trigger warning. That's what I have to say, trigger warning. If you have a difficult time dealing with some of the abuse and neglect and violence that happen towards these people, this is probably not a book that you're going to have a good time with. But I really am happy that I read it, and it's one that will definitely stick with me for a long, long time. I really enjoyed Indian Horse by Richard Wagamese. It was a heart-wrenching, powerful story, and one that would definitely needed to be read. So I'm so glad I picked that up. I'm happy I had the opportunity to read this one. It was a difficult read for sure, but check out my review on this. Indian Horse absolutely made my top 10 reads of the year. No doubt about it, for sure. Some of the other books that made my top 10 reads this year are going to be Gurzel Baden Hill. These are some fantastic reads. This is a historical fiction or historical fantasy set in medieval England based around the Arthurian legend. I actually have the opportunity to talk to I Anonymous, the author of these books, on the channel with Nico's book review. So go and check out that live stream interview that we had with I Anonymous. This is the best historical fantasy that I've ever read. I absolutely loved this series, the Arthurian legend, the Dragon Gurzel, and the magic and the politics, and it's just awesome. I've really enjoyed it. So check out my reviews on these books here on the channel. I will make sure that is linked below. These are some fantastic reads, especially if you like the historical fantasy. Well worth checking out. I Anonymous, fantastic. Really enjoyed my time talking to I Anonymous with Nico. So go and check that out. Fantastic reads. I really enjoyed them, and definitely these books make my top 10 reads of the year, hands down. One of the other books or book series that I had an opportunity to read this year, which I was really looking forward to because I'd heard so much about it, is Evan Winter's Rage of Dragons. So we got Rage of Dragons, and we also got The Fires of Vengeance. So these are some fantastic reads that I had the opportunity to read this year. It's African-inspired fantasy, and it's got demons, dragons, war, just all around. This is a fantastic read, and I really, really enjoyed it. In fact, I had the opportunity to do a review with Epic Tales as one of the videos we collabed on when I had the opportunity to visit him back in August there in Vancouver. We actually did a review together here on the channel. Check that out. I'll be sure to link that below. Epic Tales, and also read it and enjoyed it as well. We had a really good conversation about Rage of Dragons, and I absolutely loved reading these two books. So Rage of Dragons and Fires of Vengeance, some really good books by Evan Winter. It definitely has some well-deserved criticism, I think, but overall it was just fantastic reads, and I really enjoyed Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. It was so much fun, especially doing the video review that I had the opportunity to do with Epic Tales. So check that out. I'll have that link below as well. Definitely these books made my top 10 reads of the year for sure, no doubt about it. So Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. And there was also one nonfiction book that made my top 10 reads of the year as well, for which I'm really happy about because I love reading some of this awesome nonfiction stuff. But believe it or not, this one actually isn't a physics book. I know, hard to believe, right? Anyway, Chris Hadfield's An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth was definitely one of my favorite reads of the year. Definitely made my top 10 reads of the year. So this is all about the experience of Chris Hadfield, the, as far as I know, only Canadian commander of the International Space Station, and his experiences as an astronaut and what that taught him about life in general. And this was just a fantastic, insightful, enjoyable read that I really enjoyed, and I'm so glad I had an opportunity to read this one, to learn more about Chris Hadfield's experiences as an astronaut and what that taught him about life. He's got some pretty funny stories in here, like when he had a tear when his eyes were watering up and tearing in his spacesuit while he was out on a spacewalk, causing him to become basically blind in space while on a spacewalk. And of course, you can't just lift your hand up and wipe it away and clear it, and if you open your spacesuit, you're dead. So that was an interesting story that he told about his experiences as an astronaut. And it was a really enjoyable read, and I definitely recommend checking this one out if you're into that kind of thing, or even just in general. It's got some good life lessons and some good stories to illustrate some of the things that he's learned and that he's applied in his life. So that was a really enjoyable read all around, and I'm really glad I had the opportunity to read that one this year as well. And I'm also glad it made my top 10 reads of the year. And finally, these books are also rereads, but I consider, even though they're definitely not in my top all-time favorite fantasy, they are still some of the best fantasy that I've read out there. Granted, these particular books definitely make my top 10 reads of the year because I had the opportunity to read them with my daughter and also watch the movies with my daughter, and we had a lot of fun with that. And that is going to be J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings trilogy I read this year to my daughter. And I was able to get these beautiful illustrated editions as a Christmas gift last year from my amazing wife, Marianne, who is just awesome. And she got me these beautiful illustrated editions. So, of course, we have The Hobbit here. And then, of course, the classic, The Fellowship of the Rings. And, of course, we've got The Two Towers and The Return of the King. So just some really awesome books here. Beautiful illustrated editions of The Lord of the Rings, and I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to share these books and these stories with my daughter, because they really are classics of fantasy, and they really are just some fantastic reads. And while the writing style isn't my personal flavor a lot of the times, with all the description and poetry that goes in behind that, I do like some poetry, which is good, but definitely the writing style of Tolkien is not exactly the kind of style that I enjoy for the most part in some aspects. And overall, it's still a fantastic story, and I'm so glad I have the opportunity to share that with my daughter and watch the movies with her afterwards. So those books definitely made my top reads of the year as far as my year on BookTube goes. So there you have it. There are my top 10 reads of the year here on BookTube. I thoroughly enjoyed all these, and I hope that you've enjoyed some of them, or if not, maybe you will at some point. And if you're not interested in any of them, that's okay too. But those are some of my favorite reads of 2022. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for subscribing, liking, commenting. Tell me, what were some of your favorite reads of 2022? I'd love to hear from you. Check out the comments down below. Join me over on my Discord. Wherever you happen to be, that's totally fine. Or follow me on Bookstagram. And of course, as always, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, keep on reading. Bye!